Hey, welcome to day 38 in our Bible reading plan. We are in Exodus 19 to 21 and Psalm 38. And we are about to enter the giving of the Ten Commandments and then moving into this giving of the law. There's still a lot to happen in Exodus, but I want to sort of drag your attention to a few things. Mount Sinai is presumably where Moses had met with God back with the burning bush. Now he brings the people back to worship God there. And chapter 19 of Exodus is a reminder of the holiness of God and how you have to consecrate yourself before you come to God. And God gives repeated warnings not to touch the mountain. And so there's an image of God that is holy and big. And yet in a moment, we're going to see him stoop down and give this law to people. He'd say, why did God end up giving all of the laws to people? Well, we see a few things. He reveals his character in it. Don't get bogged down with the rules per se, but understand God's character. And we see as he gives the law, moving after the Ten Commandments into chapter 21, we see that the law is in defense of those who need justice and those who are vulnerable. And God's heart has always been for the vulnerable. Of course, we see that in Christ when he comes, the Son of God, and always caring for the needy. But he also sets Israel apart. Israel's gone from Abraham to his son Isaac to Jacob, and then the 12 tribes. And now they're growing into a nation, and God is setting them apart by the giving of the law. Also, he reveals human sinfulness by the law. And so this is how we know we're sinners, because God gives a standard. And of course, the standard's never meant to be met. Really, the point of the law is to point to Jesus, the only one who could deliver us from sin, the only one who completed and fulfilled the law and was flawless. We saw him in Matthew, talked about that at the Sermon on the Mount. And so as you read the Old Testament, always have your eyes on Jesus. And so just some images that are just so powerful here in Exodus 19. God tells the people words that are so soothing for any of us who is going through a difficult time and feels the sting of sin and slavery and maybe the reach to the promised land. Remember, we have the promised land in us in Christ if you're a Christian, but God says, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. The whole presence of God is the gift that God gives us at salvation, and God bears us on eagle's wings. The eagle is a soaring bird who, again, it's the strongest of birds, the most majestic of birds, and God carries us on his wings. And of course, we get into the Ten Commandments. There's a picture I don't want you to miss in Exodus 21 verses 5 and 6, and it is a picture of redemption and salvation, and it is the slave who is living at the master's house, and there's a point after so many years that the slave can go free, but the slave loves the master so much that he says, no, I don't want to leave. I want to stay willingly. And that is the picture of us when we talk about servanthood to God. It's not that we're forced to stay. We've been given a freedom. We can come to God or not. But by God's grace, he gives us a desire to say, I don't want to be away. I want to be known as a person who follows God. And so, of course, the sign here, and he takes his ear and puts it in the, puts a hole in the ear and marks this person as a slave of his master. And I just love that picture. I love God's holiness and God's goodness and God's reaching down to men. And one last thing before I leave. The people are in awe of God. They're like, we'll never, step away from God. We love him. We're going to do everything he says. See how he is. They're filled with fear, and just watch. It's not going to take long before they mess up. And that is the human nature. And again, that is why we need Jesus. So read the Old Testament, looking at Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, and rejoice in all that he's given us in himself.